Your father would be more comfortable eating with the catering staff, my son's fiancée said at his graduation dinner. She said it with a smile, like it was a compliment. I've been turning that moment over in my mind for almost 2 years now, not because it still hurts, though it did, deeply, in a way I didn't expect. I've worked too hard for too long to be undone by a 26-year-old girl with a trust fund and a pretty smile. No, I keep coming back to it because of what happened after, because of what my son did, and because of who he turned out to be. Let me back up. My name is Adele. I'm 63 years old. I have rough hands, a bad left knee, and a landscaping business that grosses just under $2 million a year. My husband Hector built it with me, side by side, for 31 years. We started with one truck, a used mower we bought from a neighbor for $400, and a list of 8 clients who were willing to give us a chance. Hector died 4 years ago. A heart attack, sudden, no warning. He was mowing a client's lawn on a Tuesday morning in September. That's how he would have wanted to go, honestly. Outside, doing something with his hands. I still can't drive past that neighborhood without feeling it in my chest. After he passed, I kept the business running. Our son Nathan was in his last year at Georgia Tech by then. Engineering. He'd worked summers with us through high school, not because we made him, but because he wanted to. He knew what we did. He knew where the money came from. He was never ashamed of it. Not once, not even as a teenager when other kids might have been. That always made me proud. What I'm about to tell you happened the spring Nathan graduated. He'd been dating a girl named Courtney for about 18 months. She was from a wealthy family in Buckhead, the kind of old Atlanta money that gets mentioned in certain circles like it's a credential. Her father ran a commercial real estate firm. Her mother sat on charity boards and wore the same expression whether she was laughing or annoyed. I met them twice before the graduation dinner. Both times they were perfectly polite in the way that people are when they've decided you're beneath them, but they haven't yet needed to say so out loud. Courtney herself was beautiful. Smart, too, from what Nathan said. She had that particular confidence that comes from never having wondered whether the lights would stay on. I don't say that to be cruel. I say it because it explains a lot about what happened later. Nathan's graduation dinner was Courtney's family's idea. They wanted to host it at their club, a private dining room at the Piedmont Club in downtown Atlanta. 12 guests, Nathan and Courtney, Hector's sister and her husband who'd driven up from Savannah, a few of Nathan's close friends from school, and Courtney's parents, her older brother Thaddeus, his wife, and her aunt. We were 2 separate worlds sitting around the same table with white linen between us. I wore a dress I'd bought specifically for the occasion, navy blue. I'd had my hair done that morning. I remember being nervous in a way I hadn't been in years, not about the food or the forks, but about whether I would be enough, whether my presence would embarrass my son on the biggest night of his life so far. That was a feeling I hadn't examined closely enough. We arrived before the others. The maitre d' seated us at a round table near the window, and I remember thinking it was beautiful. Soft light, white tablecloths, the kind of quiet that costs money to maintain. Nathan was beaming. He kept squeezing my hand under the table when no one was looking. He'd just graduated summa cum laude. My boy. Courtney's family arrived about 15 minutes late. Her mother, I'll call her Vivienne, that's not her name, but it fits, swept in like she owned the room. She probably felt like she did. Her father shook Nathan's hand firmly and said the right things. Thaddeus barely looked at me. His wife smiled in my direction, but the smile stopped at her eyes. Dinner started well enough. Conversation flowed around the table. Nathan's engineering friends were easy and funny. Hector's sister, Lorena, kept catching my eye across the table with this small, private look that said, "We see this, we know what this is, we're fine." She's a woman who raised 4 kids on a teacher's salary. She reads people the way I read soil, quickly and accurately. It was during the appetizers that it started. Vivienne was talking about a charity auction she'd chaired, and somehow the conversation turned to event planning, and then to venues, and then to what Courtney's family used for their groundskeeping, a firm out of Roswell that they'd recently let go because of quality issues. I mentioned, without making a point of it, that I ran a landscaping business. Vivienne nodded. How lovely, she said. In the tone you use when a child shows you a drawing. Her husband asked if it was mostly residential. I said we did a mix. Residential, commercial, some municipal contracts. He nodded and moved on. But Thaddeus's wife leaned over to Vivienne and said something behind her hand. I didn't catch all of it. I caught yard work and what sounded like a small laugh. I let it go. Then, just as the entrees arrived, Courtney's father said to Nathan, not to me, to Nathan, like I wasn't sitting 3 feet away, so your mother runs a landscaping crew. That's good, honest work. He said landscaping crew the way you'd say amateur hobby, and then he laughed a little and added, I imagine it keeps her busy. Nathan started to say something, but Courtney spoke first. Adele, she said, turning to me with that smile. I'm sure you'd be much more comfortable eating with the catering staff. You probably know some of them. The table went quiet. It wasn't a loud silence. It was the particular quiet that happens when something has been said that can't be unsaid, and everyone is waiting to see what comes next. I looked at Courtney. She was still smiling. I don't think she understood that what she'd said was catastrophic. I think she genuinely believed it was a kind suggestion, a way of releasing me from discomfort I must surely be feeling, surrounded by people so much more refined than I was. What I felt in that moment was something I can only describe as a kind of cold clarity. Not anger exactly. More like the feeling you get when you've been trying to read something in bad light and someone finally turns on a lamp. I set down my fork. I folded my napkin on the table. I said, calmly, no thank you, Courtney. I'm perfectly comfortable where I am. And then I looked at Nathan. He had gone still. His jaw was tight. He was looking at Courtney with an expression I hadn't seen on his face since he was 11 years old, and realized that the kid in his class who'd been bullying smaller kids was not, in fact, someone worth being friends with. I watched him make a decision. Courtney, he said. His voice was very quiet. What did you just say to my mother? I just thought she might. What did you say to my mother? The table was perfectly silent now. Even the ambient noise of the dining room seemed to step back. Courtney's father cleared his throat. Nathan, she only meant, I know what she meant, Nathan said. He turned back to Courtney. My mother built a business from nothing. She and my father started with 1 truck and 8 clients. She has been working in landscaping since before you were born, and she has done it with more dignity than I have seen in this room tonight. He paused. You just asked her to go sit with the catering staff at my graduation dinner, in front of our family. Courtney opened her mouth. I don't need an explanation, Nathan said. He put his napkin on the table. He stood up, walked around to my chair, and held out his hand. Mom, let's go. I took his hand. I stood. I picked up my small clutch, the one I'd bought at Macy's on sale 3 weeks before, and I nodded to Lorena, who was already reaching for her own bag. Vivienne said, Nathan, please, let's not make a scene. We're not making a scene, Nathan said. We're leaving. We walked out of the Piedmont Club at 7:43 on a Friday evening in May. Nathan held the door for me. The warm Atlanta air hit my face, and I breathed it in, and I did not cry until we were in the parking garage, and then I only cried for about 45 seconds because that is my limit, and because Lorena was already laughing in that quiet, shaking way she has, and she said, that girl picked the wrong table, and somehow that made me laugh too, even with the tears still on my face. Nathan hugged me for a long time in that parking garage. He said, I'm sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry. I told him he had nothing to be sorry for. He drove me to my favorite barbecue place in Decatur. We sat in a vinyl booth and ate ribs and cornbread, and he told me he'd ended the engagement. Right there. That night, he'd walked back in after we got into the car, just for a moment, and he told Courtney clearly and without drama that they were done. That it wasn't just tonight. That tonight had only confirmed things he'd been uncertain about for a long time. I asked him if he was okay. He said, "Yeah, Mom, I'm good." Here is the part of the story that I find hardest to tell. Not because it's painful, but because I worry it will sound like I'm trying to make a point. I'm not. It's just what happened. About 3 weeks after graduation, I got a call from Hargrove Commercial Properties, a mid-sized real estate firm based out of Buckhead. They were developing 2 new mixed-use properties in Midtown and needed a landscaping firm to handle the exterior maintenance contracts on both sites. Long-term, multi-year agreements. The kind of contract that doesn't come along often. During the introductory call, their project manager mentioned they'd gotten our name from one of our municipal clients, the city of Dunwoody, whose parks and medians we'd been maintaining for 6 years. We won the contract, both sites. It was the largest single contract expansion in the history of our company. 2 months after that, I was at a meeting with the Hargrove team to go over the planting specs for one of the Midtown properties. There were about 8 people in the conference room. I was introduced to a new liaison who'd just come on board. His name was familiar in a way I couldn't place, and then he handed me his business card. His last name was the same as Courtney's father's, not Thaddeus, not the father. A cousin, it turned out, who'd had a falling out with the family years back and was building his own career independently. He didn't make the connection. Our last names are different, and I don't think he knew who I was. But I knew, and I sat there in that conference room and thought about the particular smallness of the world and the particular largeness of what my husband and I had built in it. I thought about Hector. I thought about the first time he drove our truck to a client's house, a big old colonial in Marietta, and how he'd looked at me before he got out and said, "We made it, Addie." We hadn't made anything yet, not really. We had one client. We had no idea what we were doing. But he said it like it was already true. That was Hector. He believed in the destination before the road had been laid. I thought about him a lot in that conference room, sitting across from people who had no idea who I was or what I'd survived or what I built. After the meeting, I sat in my truck in the parking garage, not so different from the one where I'd cried into Nathan's shoulder 3 months before, and I let myself feel it. All of it. The pride, the grief, the strange, bittersweet satisfaction of a moment that Hector should have been alive to see. Then I started the engine and drove back to the office because there was work to be done. That's still the part that gets me sometimes, if I'm honest. Not the dinner. Not Courtney. Not even the contract. It's the ordinary morning I had the day after that dinner. The alarm at 5:30, the boots by the door, the drive out to a commercial property in Alpharetta where my crew was laying fresh sod. Standing in the early morning light watching it go down in clean, even rows. The smell of dirt and cut grass. That's real. That's mine. No one in that dining room can take that. Nathan is doing well. He's working for an engineering firm in Charlotte now, and he comes home for holidays and calls on Sundays. And last Thanksgiving, he brought someone new, a woman named Joy, who grew up in rural Tennessee and whose parents are both school teachers, and who sat at my kitchen table and asked me real questions about the business with genuine curiosity and helped me do the dishes without being asked. I liked her from the moment she walked through the door. I haven't heard from Courtney or her family. I don't expect to. I don't need to. Some lessons have a way of teaching themselves, given enough time and enough distance. The business is doing well. We have 42 full-time employees now, and a training program Hector would have loved, and a small fleet of trucks that we keep clean and in good repair. Our name is on all of them. Not Hector's, not Adele's. Just the name we picked together 31 years ago, leaning over a piece of paper at the kitchen table. trying to find something that sounded like it had always been there. It has, now. We made sure of that. I still think about that parking garage sometimes. The echo of our footsteps, the way Lorena started laughing even while I was still crying. There's something about that moment, the absurdity and the pain sitting right next to each other, that feels more honest than anything that happened inside that dining room. I've had a lot of time to turn the whole thing over. Not to make sense of Courtney, because I stopped trying to do that a long time ago. People who mistake cruelty for cleverness rarely change until the world stops rewarding them for it. What I kept coming back to was Nathan, and what I kept asking myself was, how does a person get to be who he is? I don't think it's luck. I think it's a long accumulation of small choices made over years, shaped by what they see and what they're taught and what they decide matters. Hector and I never sat Nathan down and gave him a speech about character. We just tried to live in a way we weren't ashamed of. We paid our employees fairly. We showed up when we said we would. We worked hard not to prove anything to anyone, but because the work itself deserved our full effort. We let Nathan see all of it, the early mornings, the difficult clients, the years when money was tight and we still sent Christmas bonuses because those were people who depended on us. That's what integrity actually looks like, not a value you declare, a pattern you repeat until it becomes the only way you know how to be. And the intelligence piece? I don't mean book learning, though Nathan has that too. I mean the ability to read a situation clearly without letting vanity or discomfort cloud your judgment. He sat at that table and he understood immediately what had happened and what it meant. He didn't make excuses for Courtney. He didn't smooth it over to keep the peace. He saw it for what it was. That kind of clarity is something you either cultivate or you don't. I think he learned it from watching Hector, who never once pretended a hard thing was easy just because acknowledging it was inconvenient. And then there's the part that I find hardest to teach and easiest to recognize, the willingness to bear a cost. Nathan walked away from an engagement that night. From a relationship he'd been in for a year and a half. From a family with connections and money and social ease. He did it without drama, without hesitation, because the alternative was to let something wrong go unchallenged. That takes a particular kind of spine. You can't fake it. You either have it, or you've been building it quietly for years, without knowing you were. I built a business with my hands and my husband's vision, and 30 years of early mornings, and I am proud of every inch of it. But if I'm honest, Nathan walking out of that club with me is the thing I'm most proud of. Not the contract, not the trucks with our name on them. That, Hector would have cried. He was always better at that than I was.